If you're the CEO, we're all quitting. This company's done for.
Kevin, the department head, who had slipped into the office unnoticed, declared this as I picked up the stack of envelopes left on the CEO's desk. So that's what this is about. Previously, when he came to negotiate a raise and I rejected his demands, he left with a parting remark like, "You'll regret this." It seems he intended to leave and take other employees with him. Having an employee attempting to incite rebellion is, in some ways, a failure on my part. However, this was an important matter, so I made sure to confirm with Kevin. "Kevin, just to clarify, you're saying you intend to resign from a company, correct?" Kevin laughed loudly, clutching his stomach.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You want to raise my salary, so I've got no choice. It's the era where talented people leave boring companies behind.
Hearing this, I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Thank you, that's a big help. I'll proceed with the necessary paperwork."
What?
Kevin's face contorted in confusion as he let out an incredulous noise. He had no idea that truths inconvenient to him were about to come to light. "My name is Chris, and am in my 30s. And the CEO of a tech startup." Being the CEO of a startup might sound impressive, but it's not as great as it seems. I didn't start the company myself. I ended up taking over the position due to circumstances, so it's nothing to brag about. Actually, the company was founded by my dad a few years ago. However, he suddenly fell ill and passed away. I heard he had been working tirelessly for years, barely sleeping, so am sure he pushed himself too hard. While my dad was running the company, I was working for a large multinational corporation and living overseas for several years. I knew he had started the business, but I never got to see his efforts or struggles firsthand before he was suddenly gone. At the time, my dad had asked me to help him with the company, but now it's too late to work alongside him. I've always been frugal and had saved a decent amount of money, so I didn't feel insecure about the future. When my dad told me about starting his business, I was intrigued. However, I was deeply involved in a major project at my job and wanted to see it through. I told him I'd seriously consider it once my current work was done. Just as I was nearing the end of that project, I received the news of my dad's passing. In the end, I left my job without completing the project, returned home, and took over my dad's company. Given these circumstances, I don't feel particularly proud of myself, but I can't keep looking down forever. My dad always spoke to me with my best interests at heart. Although I worked at a multinational corporation, I had a rough patch during high school when I didn't fit in and became truant, eventually attending a free school. My dad always encouraged me with kind words.
Pursue what you love and compete in areas you are good at. One day, you'll discover your strengths.
Those words inspired me, and I started exploring things I was interested in and believed would be useful in the future. I studied computers, languages, and even got certified in color design. Because of that, I was able to develop apps as a high schooler and gained enough language skills to hold business conversations with foreigners. I wanted to honor my father by taking the company he founded public and turning it into a business that contributes to society. I believed fulfilling his dream would be the ultimate way to show my gratitude, so I took over and started managing the company. However, about a year after taking on this role, I began noticing various issues within the company. If the problems were related to operations or systems, they would be easier to resolve, but the real issue lies with the people. What makes it worse is that the behavior of a department head, who is also a manager, has become a major source of concern, making the issue even more deeply rooted. His name is Kevin. Kevin's attitude toward work is blatantly unacceptable. According to reports from other employees, it seems he spends a significant portion of his working hours on side gigs.
Chris, I'm heading to the post office for a bit.
Since Kevin is in his 40s and older than me, he has spoken to me in a condescending manner since I first became CEO. Going to the post office is rarely part of his job, so I stopped him. Thanks for your hard work. By the way, what do you need to do at the post office? Kevin made an obviously annoyed face in response to my question.
Come on, there's nothing strange about going to the post office while working. I need to make a payment, and today's the due.
With that, he grabbed a large package and tried to leave the office. However, our company does not use ATMs or in-person banking for transactions. All payments are handled through online banking. Additionally, tasks like these are typically managed by accounting or sales, not Kevin. His explanation didn't sit well with me. We use online transfers, don't we? And what's in that package? Are you delivering something to a client? I stopped him again, and he frowned, speaking quickly.
The other party isn't familiar with the internet and only accepts in-person transactions at the counter. Besides, stepping out of the office now and then is a good way to refresh and boost work efficiency. As for the package, it's personal stuff. I'm just dropping it off in my car. Seriously, Chris, you're watching employees like a hawk. It's uncomfortable.
With that, Kevin kicked the office door open and hurried out. According to other employees, Kevin's main side hustle seems to be reselling goods. Our company doesn't place restrictions on having side jobs, so as long as there's no risk of leaking company information or causing harm to the business, it's not an issue. However, this policy applies only outside of working hours. Since he's paid to work during office hours, he's obligated to focus on company tasks. If Kevin is indeed using work hours for his side business, it's a significant issue. After questioning him this much today, I want to believe he isn't actually running errands for his reselling business at the post office. However, if more reports come in from employees, I'll need to conduct a thorough investigation. It's disappointing that someone in a management position, responsible for guiding and educating employees, is under suspicion like this. I'll need to keep a close eye on Kevin's behavior going forward, even as I focus on my own work. I want to focus on my work, but I keep receiving worrying reports from employees. We use employee dues to stock snacks and coffee, but the dues are depleting unusually fast. The coffee beans, which are ground and brewed by a machine, are being used up at twice the normal rate, and snacks have been disappearing by the box. Once, a large amount of snacks I replenished with my own money vanished within a day. Finding it odd, I put up a notice to address the issue, but there's been no change. On top of that, Betty, who handles accounting, approached me for advice.
It's about Kevin. His expense reports are blatantly improper. He's been submitting claims for what seem to be private drinking parties and family meals. Can you do something about it?
Betty looked at me with a troubled expression, seeking my help. She's an exceptionally talented employee with both a law degree and a CPA certification. I'd heard that, like me, she had been truant during high school and spent her time at home studying. Her determination to prove herself to former classmates who once made her life difficult had driven her to excel, and I found her incredibly strong. I've witnessed Kevin, who only sees the surface of her past truancy, mocking her on multiple occasions. Each time, I've reprimanded him.
As you said, she's a bit emotionally fragile, so I shouldn't be too harsh with her.
However, Kevin would say completely off the mark things like that. Even though he's nearly the same age, I deeply respect Betty for her incredible skills and determination. Yet, there she was, speaking with a somber expression.
Actually, I saw Kevin taking office supplies improperly quite a while ago. I discreetly warned him, but it seems he's still doing it.
As someone older and often bossy, Kevin likely intimidates Betty, making it hard for her to stand up to him. While we were discussing this in the break room, Mike came in to make coffee. He's around my age and has experience running his own business, contributing to our company in marketing and sales. Though his previous company didn't succeed, his experiences have been invaluable, and he consistently brings great ideas to the table. Being one of the founding members from when my dad started the company, Mike has the longest tenure here and knows the company inside and out. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the company runs smoothly even with me as CEO because of him. Both Betty and Mike are truly outstanding individuals. Having overheard our conversation, Mike chimed in.
Betty, I think you should let Chris know about that matter as well. It's not good to carry the burden alone, and this is a problem for the organization.
With tears in her eyes, Betty slowly began to open up. She revealed that Kevin had been persistently asking her out for meals recently. At first, she agreed, but it became clear that he had ulterior motives. Kevin has a family, and more importantly, Betty feels genuinely afraid. Although Betty is well versed in legal matters and knows how to handle this, it's difficult for her to act decisively when she's the one directly involved. She also genuinely likes working here and wants to avoid leaving or feeling uncomfortable in the workplace. Knowing how much she values the company, I was even more determined to ensure she wouldn't have to endure any more unpleasant experiences. Mike seemed to feel the same way, and in an unusually firm tone, he said to me,
If this is true, there's no reason Betty should have to endure this. I think this is serious enough to consider disciplinary action.
I completely agreed with Mike's opinion. We'll also need to prepare to form an investigation committee. I'll act on this soon. Please let me know immediately if anything else comes up. As we were discussing this, Kevin suddenly appeared in the break room.
How can you stand chatting in such a cramped space? I want to make coffee, so can you move?
Kevin waved his hand dismissively at me, and though I found it annoying, I stepped aside. From the way he spoke, it seemed he hadn't overheard our conversation. After making his coffee, Kevin grabbed a handful of snacks from a nearby table and started to leave. Mike called out to him,
Kevin, if you take that many snacks, no one else will get any. Those are my favorites, you know.
Mike said it in a light-hearted, joking tone, so Kevin didn't take offense and even smiled. Mike is not only good at his job but also has a knack for communicating without causing friction, which is likely why he's so successful in sales. I found myself impressed.
Oh, so you like these? I'll bring some in for you next time, so look forward to it.
With that, Kevin left, still carrying a large amount of snacks. Betty sighed as she watched him leave.
Kevin's so stingy. There's no way he's bringing snacks for anyone.
Seeing the dynamics in the office left me feeling heavy-hearted. Creating a comfortable work environment for employees is part of my responsibility as a leader. With thoughts of what I needed to do next, I left the break room. The following day, another issue landed on my desk. As soon as I arrived at work, Kevin barged into my office.
Ever since you became CEO, my salary hasn't gone up at all. Care to explain why that is?
Over the past year or so, I've gained a clearer picture of the company's operations, but I can say Kevin's performance has been impressive. On the contrary, he's been implicated in misappropriating supplies, working on side gigs during office hours, and causing other employees to come to me with personal complaints about him. Kevin likely has no idea about any of this, but he also seems unaware of how poorly he's performing at work. It's frustrating that someone who hardly puts in any effort is demanding a raise. Still, I couldn't say this to his face, so I chose my words carefully to make my point. Growing the company means improving employee satisfaction and attracting top talent. I'm fully committed to investing in our people, so you'll see the benefits. Please continue to work hard. I'm counting on you. As much as I wanted to confront Kevin with reality, it would be premature to assume he's at fault before all the facts are clear. Kevin didn't like my response and became even more agitated.
If you value talent, you should raise my salary immediately. Otherwise, skilled people like me will leave for better opportunities. It's easier than ever to switch jobs these days.
It was clearly meant to be a threat, but it only left me feeling annoyed rather than worried. I made sure my frustration didn't show on my face and responded with a smile. I understand your point. However, a company must be sustainable to thrive. Increasing labor costs with the current profits wouldn't be a wise move. At this, Kevin slammed his hand on the desk and gave me a menacing grin.
Got it. That's your answer, right? Don't come crying later.
Without another word, he turned his back and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. Later that evening, when I returned from an outing, I found a stack of envelopes on my desk. Curious, I picked them up, and each envelope was labeled resignation letter. There were about 30 envelopes in total. The idea that so many employees would resign at once is unheard of in a normal company. When I looked up, I realized Kevin had slipped back into the office without me noticing. Grinning smugly, he announced,
If you are the CEO, we're all quitting. This company's done for.
So that's what this is about. Previously, when he came to negotiate a raise and I rejected his demands, he left with a parting remark like, "You'll regret this." Having an employee attempting to incite rebellion is, in some ways, a failure on my part. However, this was an important matter, so I made sure to confirm with Kevin. Kevin, just to clarify, you're saying you intend to resign from a company, correct? Kevin laughed loudly, clutching his stomach.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You want to raise my salary, so I've got no choice. It's the era where talented people leave boring companies behind.
Hearing this, I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Thank you. That's a big help. I'll proceed with the necessary paperwork."
What?
Kevin's face contorted in confusion as he let out an incredulous noise. He had no idea that truths inconvenient to him were about to come to light.
What's that supposed to mean? Bluff all you want, but it's useless. After all, the core members of this company, including Mike and Betty, are leaving with me.
Though I knew this wasn't true, I didn't bother denying it outright. Instead, I began revealing the facts to Kevin, bit by bit. I acknowledge your resignation, but will be in touch with you several times regarding follow-up matters. Just so you're aware, you likely won't be receiving any severance pay. I wanted to let you know in advance since you'll need to plan for your future. Kevin's eyes widened in shock.
Hey, what kind of nonsense is that? The company employed me, so you can't treat me differently from the others for resigning.
At that moment, Mike and Betty walked into the office. Betty was the first to speak.
That would only apply if you had been working as diligently as the others. Unfortunately, we've already gathered enough evidence of your misconduct, and you'll need to make amends for that.
Kevin looked back and forth between Mike and Betty, his voice trembling.
What's gotten into you all of a sudden? Aren't you two leaving with me? You promised to quit this company and work as employees at the company I'm starting.
Betty and Mike exchanged glances, and Mike let out a sigh before responding in an exasperated tone.
Who said would follow you? Sure, we said it sounded fun. But starting a company isn't that easy. Someone who can even earn the trust of their colleagues isn't likely to succeed. There's no way we're boarding a sinking ship we already know is doomed.
Mike's words were harsh, but they carried weight, coming from someone with first-hand experience in starting a business. It was clear that he, better than anyone, understood the challenges and risks involved, and he instinctively knew Kevin wasn't capable of succeeding. Mike continued.
By the way, in the company you're planning to start, would you turn a blind eye to employees working side gigs during office hours? If so, maybe I'll join your company while still working here. You know, I've already informed Chris about how you've been spending work hours reselling items.
Hearing this, Kevin visibly panicked.
How do you know about that? No, you've got it all wrong. I'm not doing any side gigs.
Kevin desperately tried to cover it up, but Mike wasn't letting it go.
Then why do you frequently go to the post office to ship packages? And you often say you're going there to make payments, but there's no record of any transactions. I even followed you to the post office once to check things out. You see, I have connections at the post office and could just ask, but I wanted to see for myself.
Hearing this, Kevin stiffened and lashed out in defiance.
You were sneaking around and following me. That's cowardly. Besides, it's the fault of the management for paying me so little. I have a family to support. I had no choice.
Kevin was being paid well above the average salary. If he truly couldn't manage to support his family, it was either a blatant lie or a sign of poor financial management. As Kevin made excuses that didn't hold water, Betty stepped in to press him further.
So, is that why you submitted fraudulent expense claims, claiming family meals as business expenses and submitting receipts for personal purchases? Those have all been verified.
At Betty's words, Kevin turned pale and began sweating. His reaction made it clear that her accusations were true. Betty continued, her tone icy.
By the way, do you recognize this old printer sitting here in the CEO's office? I bought it through a marketplace app.
Kevin's eyes widened in horror as he looked at where Betty was pointing.
No way.
He muttered, covering his mouth with his hand.
You've been stealing company equipment and selling it on the marketplace app, haven't you? The model numbers match, and some of the items still had the company's property management stickers on them. Your recent marketplace sales have been doing well, haven't they? That's because I bought a lot of them myself.
Betty stepped closer to the trembling Kevin and spoke in a chillingly calm voice.
Embezzlement in the workplace. That could get you up to 10 years in prison. And as for all those times you mocked me for being a dropout, that constitutes defamation, punishable by up to a year in prison, a fine of up to $3,000, or both. Slander carries a penalty of up to 3 years in prison or a fine of up to $5,000.
Please, forgive me.
Ignoring Kevin's desperate plea, Betty fixed him with an icy glare.
And let's not forget, you threatened me into going to a bar even after I refused, didn't you? I'll never forget what happened there. Be aware that such actions fall under the crime of non-consensual indecent conduct, which carries a sentence of 6 months to 10 years in prison. Be prepared for the consequences.
Kevin, seeming to resign himself to his fate, collapsed to his knees in defeat. Looking up at me, he muttered in a trembling voice,
So you knew they weren't going to quit. At this rate, no one else will leave and follow me either.
Feeling a mix of pity and resolve, I shared my honest thoughts with Kevin. I'm not so arrogant as to think I'm a perfect leader, so I didn't immediately assume the resignation letters were fake. But all the envelopes had the exact same handwriting. That struck me as odd. When I first saw the resignation letters, I almost blamed myself, thinking it might be an outburst of dissatisfaction toward me or the company. However, the moment I noticed that all the envelopes had the same handwriting, I began to suspect it was a scheme orchestrated by one person. Then Kevin suddenly announced that he was leaving with a group of employees, turning my suspicion into near certainty, which led us to this point. Either way, you can no longer stay with this company. Pack your belongings and leave by the end of the day. We'll contact you about what comes next. Thanks for everything up to now. With those words, Kevin silently left the CEO's office. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Kevin had committed even more offenses. The most serious issue was the leak of customer data. Evidence was emerging that he had sold personal information from the company's database to outside vendors for significant sums of money. The list of Kevin's violations was extensive, and thoroughly compiling evidence and pursuing legal action would take time. Kevin's side hustle, reselling items, had completely stalled since Betty, his main buyer, stopped purchasing from him. Betty had only bought the items as part of the investigation, and Kevin would be required to repay more than he earned once his charges were finalized. It was reported that Kevin sold his newly built house and was now living alone in a small apartment. It seemed even his family had abandoned him. I didn't know how he would manage from here, but I could only hope he would reform and live a better life. As for me, I was working with my talented team to expand the business. Using my experience from working overseas, I was now preparing for international expansion. If this plan succeeded, the company's performance would see rapid growth. We were getting closer to fulfilling my father's dream of taking the company public. Sometimes I feel uncertain about whether things will truly work out, but in those moments, I picture my father's face and push those doubts aside. It will absolutely work. As I told myself that and looked up at the sky, I felt as if my father was smiling and nodding in approval.